Welcome everybody to Forza Horizon 4, and today we're taking a look at the 1965 Pontiac GTO. Now this is part of the first generation produced between 1964 and 1967. The GTO name itself lasted until 1974 via GM, was eventually revived by Holden in the mid-2000s. But yeah, I say GTO name because this was actually just an optional package for the Tempest in 1964 and 1965. The GTO name itself did actually become its own vehicle in 1966, lasting until 1971, but then again it became, because of declining sales, an optional package again for two standard vehicles, the Ventura and the Le Mans. But for a car that did start out as an optional package, it is really rather good. Styling wise, it was changed from 1964, radically so. It has the stacked headlights rather than the standard horizontal quad headlights. And yeah, also had a more going for it in terms of power, as this had the tri-power engine. Now the 1964 Pontiac GTO also had the tri-power engine, but thanks to revised cylinder heads with record intake passages and a high-rise intake manifolds, this had actually more power than the tri-power engine from the previous year, as well as even more power than the most powerful version of the Tempest. So yeah, engine-wise, this car is pretty formidable, especially for an early muscle car. So yeah, thanks to those upgrades, it has 360 horsepower and 424 pounds-feet of torque. So that's 25 horsepower more than the most powerful Tempest and 12 horsepower more than the tri-power engine in the previous year GTO. So yeah, pretty powerful in terms of horsepower, though the torque-wise it's slightly less than the base engine of the Tempest by 7 pounds-feet, but that's generally down to the way the engine has been retuned. So yeah, it doesn't offer quite the torque, but it does offer obviously more power. And yeah, despite being quite a hefty vehicle at 3,468 pounds, you do get the compromise with that, in the fact that because it is such a large vehicle, you have plenty of interior space. Easily get 3 people in the back there, and obviously 2 people in the front with plenty of room. And yeah, you easily have one of the biggest boots on a muscle car from this period. Probably get 2 other people in there if you really needed to. And yeah, I love the looks of it, quite frankly. And even though it is obviously an optional package version of a Tempest, it is still nonetheless a really cracking car in its own right. And yeah, easily one of my favourite muscle cars from the period. Not just thanks to the looks, but yeah, it's got fairly formidable amount of power for an early muscle car, like I said. I mean, you look at a Mustang GT from around the same period, and yeah, you didn't even get 300 horsepower out of that. Now granted, a Mustang GT from 64-65 weighed a lot less, but even so, this, yeah, easily outpaced it in terms of acceleration, and yeah, probably top speed as well. But obviously, being a muscle car, it's going to have its flaws, like they all do. It's got drum brakes all around, so stopping wise it's not all that great, especially with all that weight behind it. And yeah, the steering was criticised back in the day for really being quite slow. It takes 4 turns of the steering wheel to get full lock. And yeah, since it's hardly a small steering wheel, that is quite a way to turn a vehicle. So yeah, nonetheless, let's get out there and see just what this incredible muscle car can do. So yeah, even though it is quite a hefty engine in terms of size at 6.4 litres, obviously it's not the biggest engine that you'd get from a muscle car on the period, but yeah, it's still plenty sizable, especially for a car of this size as well. And yeah, it does, again, like I said earlier, have its problems. The drum brakes really aren't all that effective in terms of slowing the car down. It's, yeah, it does have quite a lot of body roll, as you can see. And yeah, it really does like to oversteer quite a lot. But these are just characteristics of most muscle cars from the period, so I'm really not going to be too downbeat on it for that. And at the end of the day, it does make it a challenge and somewhat fun to drive, because you know you're not going to be able to relax at any moment, because you know you're going to be on the ball with these kind of things if you're going to drive it fast. Unfortunately, it's not just in terms of handling that this car's let down a little bit. It has a 4-speed manual gearbox, which is fairly good, because obviously there were muscle cars back in the day that had 3 speeds or even only 2 speeds, but the gears are really short together, so yeah, that gives it a good acceleration, but it also really rather limits the top speed. Speaking of acceleration, it can do 0 to 60 in 5.74 seconds, 0 to 100 in 13.295 seconds, but it does only have a top speed of 129 mile an hour, which as you can see we're getting close to. And yeah, that really does not cut it, quite frankly, because yeah, there are muscle cars out there with less power than this that could do more than that. A Camaro Z28, for instance, from the day with around 290 horsepower would have been able to do more than that. So yeah, it is a little bit of a shame, but obviously this comes down to what was picked at the time, because obviously this is a very specific car. You could option various, you know, gearboxes, rear axles, engine sizes, engine power, and the like. So obviously there would have been vehicles out there with a 4-speed manual with a longer, you know, longer gear changes on it, better ratios and the like. So yeah, again, it's all down to the car that was picked at the time. Me personally, I would have gone for you know, longer ratios, sacrifice a little bit of acceleration for a much higher top speed. But you know, these kind of cars were all about acceleration and quarter-mile drag racing and the like, so it does help it, you know, achieve that via quicker acceleration times. And yeah, less than 6 seconds to 60 is fairly formidable for a car that, you know, weighs this much, isn't exactly the most aerodynamic of vehicles, and yeah, is also not as powerful as some later muscle cars. So yeah, I am really glad to put this in the game. You could only get it as part of one of the season, the Forza playlist, Forza Fun playlist, as part of, I think, the winter season. So yeah, obviously that's passed by now, so yeah, you're either gonna have to find this on the auction house or try and get it some other way. But yeah, I am really glad to put it in the game. We've not had this version of the Pontiac GTO for a while now. I know we've had the likes of the Judge for a long time, which is again another one of my favourite muscle cars. But yeah, this is easily one of the originators of the muscle car, and yeah, it's one of the greatest, not just for that. Also looks really rather good, really like the engine noise, and yeah, acceleration wise it is really rather good. Easily either matches or outclasses several other muscle cars that we have on this game, quite frankly. And yeah, even though it does have its handling issues, there aren't many muscle cars out there that don't. So yeah, it's really just following a kind of a pattern of muscle cars from the time, because it was all about big engines, big power, and think about everything else after, quite frankly. But yeah, that's gives it some characteristics, I guess, and yeah, it does make it an entertaining drive. Nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.